Well, if you want to know about me, I don't know I don't want to bore you, but if I'm going to tell my story, I guess I'll start at the beginning. I was born in 1922 in a family where I was the second child of 7 children, and I was the oldest son. I had 2 younger brothers, but they were enough younger that I never really got to play with them. My dad put me to work pretty young, and since the 2 younger ones were pretty close to the same age, they had a lot of fun together, but I really didn't get to play with them. Anyway, I started school at 5 and graduated at 17, and already knew at that time what I wanted to be when I grew up. I grew up on a farm and I enjoyed that, and I had decided early on that I was going to be a farmer. And so I didn't need to go to college. I got my education right there working with my dad. And during those years, I learned 3 especially important things. I learned how to work hard and enjoy it. I learned how to live simply and how to manage money. So I carried those through with my life. And when I was in school, I saw this one girl that caught my eye, and turned out we went to the same church, and we spent the same 4 years in the same grade in high school. So I knew her pretty well. And so I wanted to date her, but she wasn't too keen on that. She didn't think I was quite dry behind the ears, I guess. But I finally convinced her that I'd be a good one to date. And so we finally began to date when we were seniors. And after we graduated, we dated for 2 years, and then we got married. Kind of young, some people thought, but we thought we were ready for it. And so anyhow, we got married, and I had to get a job. The only time in my life that I looked for a job was because I had to have something to support my family with. And so I got a job with a farmer, because that's what I wanted to do anyway, and worked for him 2 years. In the second year there, that would have been 1943, was the year that our oldest son was born. That's him there with the blue shirt on.
Tell us how much you made that week.
Well, yeah, I got a book here with that we kept our records. The first full year we were married, not the first year, but the first full year, that would have been 43. You might be shocked at my wages, not how big they were, but how small they were. I got $9 a week, cash. But it wasn't quite that bad, because they furnished us an old house. It was just a shell, but it was something to live in, but no central heat, no water in the house, and electricity, but just one bulb hanging from each room. No outlets or anything like that. And so we had to use the outside toilet, had to carry all our water in and out again. And we always had a water bucket in the kitchen. That was our water source, drinking water. And on cold winter mornings, that was all often froze over. It was a cold house. I don't know how we kept that baby warm that year, but we managed. I did tell you, I got $9 a week. And then they furnished us this old house, and they furnished us the cow milk and 25 chickens. And so the chickens paid for our groceries, and the 2 cows, I got a cow from home, and when I was married, as a wedding present. So I got a small milk check, and the chickens paid for our groceries. And so our income, our income paid for our outgo. And at the end of the 2 years there, we had saved $1,500. And that's before we moved to Goshen. And so it was a kind of a simple beginning. I knew right away, as soon as I could get away from being a hired hand, I wanted to be my own boss. So 2 years later, we were able to rent a farm close to Susie's folks' place. And we worked there and milked cows and raised hogs on shares. And there again, I made my own decisions, but the landlord lived just across the garden from us. So I felt like he was looking over my shoulder all the time. And I knew as quick as I could, we were going to buy my own farm. So after 4 years there, we bought a farm. But we couldn't afford the land around where we grew up, so we ended up in northern Indiana, close to an uncle of mine who was a preacher up there, and he said he knows of a farm that's for sale up there. And so we looked at it, and well, it had a pretty nice house on, but we knew it was kind of a run-down farm because it had been rented out quite a while. So we bought that farm, and there again, it didn't have central heat, didn't have a bathroom. So we had to use an outdoor toilet, and we had to get a heating stove again. But that same spring, we put in a furnace and a bathroom, and we had a pretty nice house then to live in.
How many acres was it?
That was 120 acres. No, it was 90 acres. And later, we bought 30 more to it and made it 120.
What did you pay per acre?
$90 an acre. And so, it wasn't the greatest farm, but I figured, well, the land can be built up by the way you farm it. And so we went to work at that. And after we lived there a couple of years, our second son came along, Daryl, the guy here with the green shirt.
I was born in Peru, wasn't I?
Huh?
I was born in Peru.
Oh yeah, you were. That's right. Before we moved up there, and but after we lived up there, we needed the bedroom for you and us, and so we sent Arlie upstairs to sleep. And here was this little guy, about 4 years old, and we just got settled down in bed, and we heard a thump on the floor. Uh-oh, he must have fell out of bed. But the all got quiet, so we didn't go check on him. Next morning, when he came down, Susie said, "Did you fall out of bed last night?" "Yeah, I did." "Did you hurt yourself?" "No, I didn't even know I fell out till I looked up and seen I wasn't there." And so that's the way we got our start up there on that farm. It was at Howard Inn, almost the Michigan line. We lived there for 3 years, and all of a sudden we saw people out in the middle of our farm setting stakes. And when we got to inquiring, we found out that they were going to put the toll road right through our farm, the east-west toll road. And so nothing you could do about that but let them go. And so there, that one year, even through the night, they'd be working bulldozers and ground levelers and all that stuff, and lights. They'd work right through the night. And we decided that's kind of going to spoil the farm, and we didn't think we wanted to stay there that long, so even though it lessened the value of the farm, we ended up selling that. And about that time, the Bethany Christian School was started at Goshen. We thought we'd like to send our children to that school. And so we started looking around Goshen for a different farm.
Girls were born up there.
What?
Girls were born up there.
Lorraine and I was born when you lived up.
Oh yeah. While we lived up at Howe, Susie got pregnant again. And she tried to prepare these boys, our two young sons, for this new baby that was coming. Oh, they were so excited. Can we tell Daddy? Well, Daddy already knew it. But she said, well, what about it? They was all excited about this. Would you let this new baby, when it grows, runs around, would you let him play with your toys? Oh, yeah. Well, that time came, and then the boys complained. And Susie reminded them of what they said. And they said, well, we didn't know it would be like this. But we managed, and
You still say that, don't you?
I suppose, yeah. Sean's boys probably have that problem now. So anyhow, we sold that farm and bought a farm between Goshen and Napanee, and moved there. And we thought we had our family now. We had 2 boys and 2 girls, and went along like that for 8 months. And then we had a surprise,
8 years.
and that's when Dallas came into the family.
8 years.
8 years, yeah, later. So he was kind of a tag along. And that's why we got grandchildren that are kind of behind too, and great grandchildren. When I was 7 years old, we had the 1929 recession, and people really got hard up. The people in the cities lost their jobs, and there was food lines prepared. But we on the farm, we didn't even know there was a recession. We had our own milk, and we had our own eggs, and we had our own meat. We lived well. But some of those city people, they didn't live so good. And during that time, even though things were hard, my folks had bought that farm, and they still owed on it. But a lot of people lost their farms, but they didn't lose theirs because they had kept the interest paid up through the years until things started getting better and got it paid off. And in 1929, my dad was able to buy a new car, 1929 Ford. Remember that? And so we done pretty well, really. And like I said, during that time, I learned to work, and we got along good on the farm. And I think I'm about the end of my talk. Any questions you'd like to ask?
Tell us about your wedding.
Our wedding?
Yeah.
I doubt if anybody would be impressed about that. I was secretary in church, and so we had 27 classes in the church, and I had to take the offering envelopes around and the record books to all these classes. And so Susie and I had decided we would get married on a Sunday morning, but we didn't tell anybody. So I did my chores at church as usual, and after I passed these out, we went home and changed clothes. And then when we came back, I had somebody else to gather up those envelopes and take care of the records. And then it wasn't like I heard about one time, about this preacher, he said, those who want to get married today would please stand up, and there was one man and 3 women came up. It wasn't that way in our case, but anyhow, that's when Susie and I showed our faces. And there was a sermon preached on the Christian home, and after that we were married right there in the church. That was our wedding.
So why didn't you tell anybody about it? I mean, was that just the tradition, or you just...
Well, I don't know, we just...
That's just how people do it?
People like surprises, you know. And we went home to Susie's folks' house, and they had a big dinner there. But then, guess what? We didn't go on a honeymoon. We didn't have any money. And so instead of going on a honeymoon, we went to that old house that was part of our wages, and worked there and got it fit to live in. And when I was 17, my dad bought me a car, and so we had this 35 Ford car, and Susie had a bedroom suite, and we had to buy the rest of our furniture. And so we started up very simply. And like I said, we learned on the farm, we learned to live economically, and we didn't spend money on expensive entertainment. But we did do some traveling. After that happened a little later, we did go on a trip that we took Arlie along when we went on what we called our honeymoon. We went to Niagara Falls, we went to Canada and around, and then later in our years we were able to travel some more. Glenn and Lorraine had spent time in Puerto Rico in voluntary service, so we went down to visit them. And we made a trip to Haiti, spent a couple of weeks down there in mission work. We went to Europe. They had a farm progress show going on in Paris. That was great to see, especially for me, a farmer. And we went to Switzerland and Holland and Germany and Belgium and Paris and England. And then later we went over again on a mission fellowship tour, and that time we got to go to Israel. And there again we went to Germany and Paris and a few of those places which we didn't really care to go back to, but I think if we could have, we would have enjoyed going back to Switzerland or Holland again. Those were special places to visit. And
Don't forget you drove to Alaska.
oh yeah, well, yeah, we had another couple that were going to go to Alaska, and they were great campers, and they invited us to go too. Well, we didn't have a camper, but we bought a new pickup truck for the farm that year, and had a camper built for it. And we took Fern and Dallas along. The older children, they took care of the farm. Arlie, where were you? You were gone by then.
Albuquerque already.
Yeah. Anyhow, we went to Alaska, 1,100 rough miles of gravel in that camper. Susie complained a little that she had to cook all the time because we had our facilities there to do that with. And she didn't seem to think as much of my problem was that great, but I had to do all the driving. But anyway, when we got up there, we decided we didn't want to go back that way again. It's a rough 1,100 miles. So we went to the proper authorities and inquired about going back on a ferry. And they said, well, that's all filled again. Susie just dropped her purse. She said, well, I realize evidently you're not much of a traveler. But we left our name in the pot, and somebody dropped out, and we did go back on the ferry then instead of driving back. And we were up there 5 weeks and had to hurry back for a wedding. Ended up in Seattle, and so that was our trip to Alaska. And got any more
Rocky
questions?
Mountain Camp one year with a new 57.
What?
Went to Rocky Mountain Camp one year.
Yeah,
A new 59 Ford 6-cylinder automatic.
Yeah.
Couldn't get uphill.
yeah. We did. We bought this new car, and then we went on this trip to Rocky Mountain Camp, and that's pretty steep going on. I had a cabin rented up there, but this 4-cylinder Ford could hardly make it up the mountain.
6-cylinder.
No, it was a 4-cylinder.
That was a 6-cylinder automatic, wasn't it? It was a 6-cylinder.
Which was it, Arnie?
The 6 and the 2-speed automatic.
Okay.
That was wonderful.
Anyhow, it didn't have enough power for that. Had to get out and push it.
We had to get out and push.
Yeah. I actually had to get out and push and get us up that mountain.
Never moved it again, they moved down.
So the last night, we didn't go up there to sleep. We just stayed down below instead of going through all that time to get up the mountain. Well, you got any more questions?
Tell us how you used to walk in your sleep.
Did I do that?
Yeah.
Another thing I could tell you, when I was younger, I was 6 feet tall and could walk straight, but not anymore. And anyhow, and along with that, I've gotten forgetful too, much more. And some more, you will experience more of that as you get older, I'm sure. But anyhow, yeah, I guess I did walk in my sleep when I was still at home, I mean with my folks. One night, I don't know what I was thinking, but my mom heard me come downstairs, and she came out in the living room to check on me. And here I had brought all my covers off the bed, dumped them on top of the stove in the living room. And I went back up and was all curled up there without any covers. But I often wondered if that would happen, because Susie and I did some traveling to friends in other states, and I thought, boy, I hope I never walk in my sleep when I'm at some stranger's place. I never did. But at home I did. So.
Tell that story about the bad brakes on the 35 Ford Mom.
Well, this car that my dad bought for me, it was a good car, had a lot of power and pep, but terrible brakes. That was before they put hydraulic brakes on the cars. And you had to keep them really adjusted very well, which I didn't manage often. And one time, Susie took her mother and were you, I guess, you two boys, and went to Kokomo. And on the way home, she came up behind a semi, and he stopped kind of suddenly, and she couldn't stop quick enough. And so she ended up hooking up to that semi. So when he took off, they went along. Oh, they were scared. They didn't know how far you were going to take them. But it so happened that they didn't go very far, and the semi hit a bump and unhooked. And he never ever knew that he was pulling us along. So that car was a kind of a problem.
Wasn't there a story about a broken toe after that?
A what?
A broken toe?
Oh, well, yes, but that wasn't too much of a problem. It healed.
Well, but how did it happen?
Well, I dreamed sometimes when I was sleeping. I guess you call them nightmares. And I thought I was coming onto a car, and boy, I slammed on the brakes, and my foot went over the foot end of the bed, and it broke my little toe. But that.
Tell them about the time you had a bright idea for unloading those cows in the trailer.
Well, that wasn't anything too great. When we moved to northern Indiana, we had a couple of sows we wanted to haul up there, and we had a trailer behind the car, and we put them in the trailer, and when I got up there, I had to unload them. So I was by myself. And so while the sows were in the front of the trailer, I quicked up the tongue and was going to dump them out the back, but the sows moved back at the same time and caught my foot under the trailer. And boy, I was just sure I had a shoe full of blood, but turned out when they checked my foot, there was no blood in there at all. So I was okay, and that was the end of that. And so, well, I had a lot of other experiences, but they wouldn't be too interesting, I don't think, to you. Yeah.
Both the girls were born in Michigan, both all the boys were born in Indiana.
Yeah, two of those boys were born down in Peru, Indiana, where we lived, and we had a man doctor for them, and we got two boys. Well, after we got up to northern Indiana, Susie got pregnant again, and we heard about a woman doctor in Sturgis, Michigan, which is only 7 miles from where we lived. And Susie wanted to use that woman doctor. So we went to her, and she got us a girl. That's Lorraine. And so went along for a couple of years and got pregnant again. went back to the same doctor. She got us another girl. That was Fern. And so I don't know if there was any significance to that, but after that we ended up moving back over to Elkhart County after the toll road went through our farm. And we were back in Elkhart County. Susie got pregnant again. And then we got a man doctor. Sure enough, got another boy. And that was Dallas. So those were some of the interesting experiences. Had a lot more, but don't want to bore you with any more.
What else do you have written in your book?
Well, I didn't tell you what our income was for the first year. I told you I got $9 a week, and plus these other things, a cow to milk and a house to live in. Second year, he upped my wages to $12 a week. And so I totaled up the wages for that year of 1943, if I can find it here. And our income was $1,500.87 for the year. And our expenditures were $124.50. And so it didn't seem like much, but during those 2 years of that kind of wages, we still saved $1,500. And so we thought we were well prepared to rent a farm, in which we did. And from renting a farm to buying a farm was the next step. And so I think that the farm has treated us very well. And Susie never had to work away from home to help pay the bills. The farm took care of that. And along with it, she was a good seamstress. She did all her sewing for herself and the girls too, and maybe even a little for me. And so that all helped us. And so we did well financially and was able to travel a little. And I think I told you about the trips we took to Israel and Puerto Rico and Haiti and Alaska and London and Brussels and all those places. So we did quite a bit of traveling. I thought it was a lot anyhow. But it was kind of interesting. One of the greatest thing about all those trips was getting back home. And I was always kind of a stay-at-home person, but with a wife to please and all that, we did some traveling, and so we got around quite a bit. Any more questions?
When did you start doing woodworking?
Well, one time when we were still on the farm, Susie said, I think she thought I was becoming a workaholic. And she said, you ought to have a hobby. Well, I said, I don't fish, and I don't bowl, and I don't golf, but I think I would enjoy working with wood. So she encouraged me to get some tools, which I did, and that started my hobby, working with wood. And I still got the tools, but I haven't used them any for quite a while now because I don't need any more furniture, and the children don't need anything more either. And it's a very rewarding hobby though, and you can make a lot of nice things out of some pretty small pieces of wood.
But
I learned that.
You did some when you were in school too, didn't you? Because I have that secretary that you made in 8th grade.
Yeah, I learned. We had one subject we could take when I was in grade school. That was shop, but we only had a couple hours once a week. We could work at that, and we could make things out of lumber. And I made a hall tree and a medicine cabinet when I was in the 7th grade, and when I was in the 8th grade, I made a bigger cabinet. And when I was a freshman, I made a still bigger cabinet, and I still got that. And I got some of the others too, but it's just an interesting hobby to have, and I'd encourage any of you looking for a good hobby, buy some wood and start making things out of wood. I've made dozens and dozens of cutting boards out of different kinds of wood. I'd take walnut, cherry, and maple and cut them in strips, and glue them back together and made a pretty nice, colorful cutting board. Made lots of them. And they made good gifts. So I think I'm run out of anything to say now.
How did you start going to Texas in the winter?
Well, we had a couple, let's see. I guess we went to Haiti through Daryl's influence. He went down there on a work crusade, and he was excited about that. He said that we ought to go down to Haiti too sometime. So we found out about a family crusade that was planned, and so Daryl and Lorraine, you went along, didn't you?
Fern and I went along.
Fern and Lorraine went along. Dallas was too small, we didn't take him. But we went down to Haiti and we spent 2 weeks down there. And went to the Brush Arbor meetings with the Haitians. And that's how we got started going down there. Then we heard about a couple from our church that in the wintertime, to get away from the cold, he's a retired farmer, and he went to Texas. They went to Texas with a mobile home and helped down there at the Rio Grande Bible Institute. And so we went down one year and just stayed in a motel, try it for a week to see how we like it. And we thought we'd like to get involved in that. And so this one couple told us that they're going to be visiting some other people for the year. They had a mobile home. They said, if you want to use our mobile home, you can use it. And you can look up for a mobile home for yourselves in during that time. There was one street there that was all lined up with hookups for people who come down in the wintertime and volunteered their work. And construction and things like that. So we found bought us a new mobile home, small one bedroom, 14 by 40, and pulled it in there, and I helped in the shop where we built cabinets and beds and whatever they needed there at the school. And Susie was overseeing the women who were doing making comforters for the poor people in the valley, and some of them went to Mexico too. So that kept her busy, and we did that for 20 years in the winter. We didn't leave until the crops were all harvested in the fall, and then we always got back in time to help plant again in the spring. And so we did that for 20 years. And then the work was a little more than we wanted anymore, so we quit doing that. And then we missed the warm weather of Texas, so we went to Florida for a couple of years, but that was kind of boring because all we had to do would be play shuffleboard and stuff like that. And so that wasn't as interesting as going to Texas.
What was your life's greatest challenge?
My greatest challenge? I don't know if I had any challenges. Well, I guess I did. But didn't think about them being challenges. Well, when we first rented our first farm, like I told you, the landlord lived in another house, just a garden between us. He was a widower, an old man. Maybe not as old as I am, but kind of old. And he would come over in the evening with some kind of a container to get milk when we were milking. And he'd even come in the wintertime. One time in the wintertime, he came over there and carrying a lantern on his arm. We didn't have electricity then. I mean, yes, we did. We did too. I should have told you earlier, we didn't have electricity in our house where I grew up until I was 14. But he brought his lantern along because we didn't have any other lights out in the barn lot or anything. And he got his milk and he started for home. Pretty soon he came back in. He said, "Have you seen my lantern?" And it threw on his arm. That kind of tickled us. Embarrassed him, of course.
How did you stay so warm if it was
What?
really cold? Like, in the first house you had, you said there wasn't heating. How did you stay warm?
How did we stay warm?
Yeah.
Well, we had to get us a stove, and of course we made use of long underwear and lots of covers when we went to bed. And when I got out of bed in the morning, stepped on that cold linoleum floor, I sure didn't stand around long. Because ice on the water bucket in the kitchen, you know it's cold in there. So I'd get busy and build a fire, heat the place up, got Susie up. And we enjoyed ourselves. We had each other. And for 2 years, we made out pretty well. And then when we rented this farm, wow, we were in business. We had a stoker on our furnace in the basement and a bathroom. We really had it made. But I had to deal with the landlord, which I didn't like very well. That's what made me want to get my own farm as soon as I could.
What did you and Grandma fight about?
What?
What did you and Grandma fight about? Every married couple fights occasionally or has disagreements.
Well, we didn't always agree on everything, but we didn't call it fighting.
She didn't care if you bought a new car, but she didn't like you buying a tractor.
Yeah, we traded cars quite often, and she went along with that easily, but she didn't like it when I bought a bigger tractor. So we differed on that, but we made do with what we bought.
She didn't like some of the long hours of the farm, did she? Or she wanted to be able to
Well,
go away evenings and...
Yeah, she wasn't happy that we had cows to milk. And that's a job that has to be done twice a day, every day of the week, no matter what the weather, rain or shine. And she wished I was something else, but she never did tell me what she wished I'd do instead of getting farmer. So she just went along with it, since I was a breadwinner. And when we moved to the other farm, we did have things a lot nicer. We had a milking parlor and so things like that made milking a lot easier, but still had to be done.
Did you ever want to be anything besides a farmer?
Do what?
Did you ever want to have a different job besides being a farmer?
No, I didn't. I did a little carpenter work on the side one year in the fall when there wasn't anything rushing on the farm, but I didn't work at anything much for wages.
I think I heard you say once that you would have paid somebody to let you farm if you'd have had to.
Well,
That you just wanted, that was all you ever wanted to do.
yeah, that's all I ever wanted to do, be a farmer. And Susie would have liked to went to college. I wish she could have. But she never did tell me what she would train for if she could have. But her folks didn't have the money to help, so instead of going to college, she married me. And you couldn't have paid me to go to college. I didn't want any more book learning. I knew that what I learned on the farm would help me earn a good living for the family. And so I was just a farmer. And so she was a faithful woman, went with me on our moves in different places. And even though she wasn't that happy always about the fact that I had to milk cows twice a day.
What were your parents like?
What?
What were your parents like?
My parents?
Yes.
Well, they were God-fearing people, and they were farmers, of course. Susie grew up on a farm too, but she would have preferred if I would have been something else besides a dairy farmer. But
Tell us a little bit about your mom.
my mom,
Yeah.
well, I had an older sister, and then I had a sister next to me, a couple years younger, and then we had another baby boy. And when he was 9 months old, he caught the diseases that we brought home from school and got pneumonia and couldn't throw it off and took his life. And that really got to my mom. She wasn't able to go to the funeral, and it actually affected her mind. And so for one summer, she was in Indianapolis at a mental hospital, and we could go down and visit her on Sunday afternoons. We got some pictures of doing that. And I guess it was just the summer that she had to be there, and we had to have a hired girl at home to take care of us little kids. And we were glad for that to change. So she got to come back home after 6 months and seemed to be pretty well. And anyhow, they had 3 more children after that. And but she struggled with what do they call it? Bipolar?
Probably, yeah.
Bipolar. What's the extra word?
Manic depressive.
Manic, yeah.
Yeah, manic depression. She had to deal with that for 40 years. And so she'd feel real good for a month. She'd feel too well. She'd get up at 3:30 in the morning and start cooking and baking and all that stuff, inviting company for Sunday dinners. And then when this come on her, she might be in a month when she hardly got out of bed. She just was so depressed. And so my dad had to deal with that for long years. And I'm sure, I always have felt that if that would be nowadays, there would have been medication that would have helped her a lot. But at that time, they didn't seem to, we tried a lot of different things, but nothing seemed to really help. And so...
And how old was she when she died?
She was 80 when she died, and my dad was 94. And I don't know, I guess I got more of my dad's genes, but because I will be 90 if I can live till October. But I have no desire to get to be 100 like some people do, or even 95. I'd be ready to go tonight if the Lord would call me. I don't find it a lot of fun living alone after having almost 66 years with Susie, but that's the way it is. And but I do have family close. Daryl and Karen live right next to me in a duplex, and they treat me very well. They invite me to a lot of evening meals. And Lorraine and Glenn live less than a mile away. They help me a lot. Lorraine canned a bushel of peaches for me just a month or so ago. And Fern lives about an hour and a quarter away. She comes up every chance she gets. When Susie was sick, I didn't tell you about Susie. When she was about 82 or so, her kidneys began to fail. And so she had to go on dialysis. And we did that at home. I learned how to use a machine and did the dialysis every night. I hooked her up, and that worked pretty good. She could do whatever she felt good enough to in the daytime when she was up. And then after a year and a half or so, we had to go to Mishawaka once a month to have her blood tested, and they could learn a lot from those blood tests about her kidneys. And once they called us and said that the tests show that her kidney has improved a lot. Let's try just doing it every other night. So we did, and that worked pretty good. And then a few weeks later, they called again and said, let's try just discontinuing that. And we didn't think that could happen. Usually, you have to stay on that till you die. So we discontinued it. A couple weeks, it went pretty good. Went a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months went without it. And they said, well, it's possible that you might have to go back on half-time. And then Susie said, well, I don't want to go back on half-time. In the meantime, they come and got the machine. They come and got the supplies. So if she went back on, we'd have had to start from scratch. And then she had one knee that was so bad that she couldn't put any weight on it. And she had high blood pressure, and so she had some other health issues. And so she said, I don't want to go back on dialysis, just let nature take its course. So that's what we did. So she lasted about 10 days. They said there won't be any pain with it. She'll sleep a lot more, and she won't eat much, and it'll gradually take her. So that's the way she went. So I was a nurse for about 2 years. The hard part about it was, the hardest part for me was that she also has dementia with it. And the doctors noticed that before I did. But what really got to me was I was with her all the time, and there were several times she didn't recognize me. And one time she thought I left, and I was right there in the room with her. And she thought I was gone for 2 days. And I thought, how can that be? And I thought she'd get over that after a while. But one day on the way to Mishawaka to get this blood test, she said, you know, you never did tell me where you went that time when you were gone for 2 days. And I didn't know what to say, because I knew if I tell her I was right there, she'd say I was lying to her. So I just didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. So that kind of thing really was hard to take. And one time she could find her way around the house, but she did talk about, why is the kitchen at the other end of the house? It was things that were turned around for her. But she'd find her way to the bathroom, and she never gave me any trouble when I had to help her dress, get her weighed, and get her medication taken. But one evening she said, and she thought this other guy's name was Wayne. There seemed to be 2 men in the house, and then that was me, and I said, my name's Wayne, but I didn't look like Wayne to her. So one evening on the way to the bedroom, she said, I want my Wayne. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That was one of the hardest decisions I had to deal with.
Maybe that was your biggest challenge.
Could be ill.
Grandfather, having lived almost 90 years, you have a vast amount of experience. What is perhaps a single or a series of very good bits of advice you could give to everyone?
You mean farming?
Well, not all of us are farmers.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, I guess farming would have to do.
Advice about life, maybe.
What?
Advice about life.
Oh, advice about life?
Any general advice that you would give?
Well, I've noticed that in years growing up that so many people, when they got out of school, they didn't know what they was going to do for a living. Well, I never had that problem. I knew I was going to be a farmer, and that's what I was. And I was never sorry that I was. I was always grateful that I could raise my family on the farm, and I knew that they would learn how to work there, and they could go from there and make a success at about anything that they wanted to. I have to tell you something about Fern. Fern was 2 years behind Lorraine, and Lorraine was in, I think, 2nd grade, and you came home and was all excited telling Susie about how his teacher asked you to help her. And she was just all excited about that. She said, when I get big, I want to be a teacher. Fern said, I don't. I'm just going to be nothing, just like Mama. She meant she didn't want to go to college, I guess, but she did take some other courses, but she didn't go to full college. And she became a good mama, just like Susie was.
one of the things, in terms of advice, one of the things you always taught us was to not spend money you didn't have.
Yeah, that's
Didn't
right.
have.
Well, that's how we saved $1,500 when we was working by the month on these small wages. We always paid our bills as we went and got everything we needed, and what we didn't need, we put in the bank. And I was able to retire at 62. I never earned anything from working. I worked, but didn't get any wages after that. And so and we were able to do a lot of traveling. So, if you want to retire young, well, find a way to save enough money so that you can do that.
If I described to most of my friends what you did, they would find it a mundane and hard practice. What drew you to it so much, having been around your family that were also farmers?
I guess my hearing's fading a little bit. I didn't get that.
Why do you love farming so much?
Why did I love farming? Well, I grew up on a farm, and I learned to enjoy it. I learned to work hard and enjoy that. And I knew that I was sure I could make a good living. I know I had a friend that he was a little older than I was, but he had a girlfriend, but he hesitated to get married because he wasn't sure he could support her. Well, I never had that problem because I knew I could support a wife well on a farm. And so.
And you like being your own boss.
And I like being my own boss. Only had to look for a job once. That's when we first got married. And after that, I rented a farm. I made my own plans, and then we bought a farm. And so, made my own plans. And that's worth a lot, I think. I hear about some people who have jobs in factories, and I remember when Darrell got out of high school, I said, well, in the wintertime, we just don't have that much farm work to do. You can go to the factory and get a little money. You want to trade cars. So he went to Elkhart and got a job right away. That was when things were going up. And he came home at night, went in the house, and he told Susie, I know now why people go home from work and kill their wives. He didn't like working in a factory, but he went back. He went back one more day, and when he came home and he was happy, he said, I quit.
3 days, I lasted.
Was it 3? Anyhow.
Did you work one day? Did you work one day?
In the factory?
Yeah. No?
I don't think he did.
It was just in the printing press.
Anyway, I guess he had to do with his older car longer. And he took a job on a mobile feed mill where it was a lot harder work than he did in the factory, I think. But at least he got out to the farms and he enjoyed that kind of. And he finally got to where he could trade cars. The farm, there was a lot of variety of activities on the farm. We did work hard, and we had to do the milking twice a day, but in between morning and evening, you could get away and go to a farm sale or do something else. And so there was some variety to it. It sure wouldn't be like working in a factory. I don't think I'd have lasted very long in a factory either.
What's the biggest trouble your kids ever got into?
Which one?
My children didn't really give me any trouble. They were a good group of kids. And instead of me buying them each a car, like my dad did, I paid them some wages. I don't know how much it was anymore, so that they could buy their own clothes and find out how expensive clothes were. And then when they wanted a car, they could buy their own car. And if they wanted to buy an expensive one, they'd have the bill to pay. So I guess that worked pretty well.
I've never yet bought a car,
Haven't you?
not by myself.
I never got into trouble every time.
We had a little problem between Daryl. Daryl was 3 years and 1 day younger than Arlie. And we thought for a while he was going to have the same birthday, but we spent the night at the hospital on the day that Arlie had his birthday. But Daryl, he drug his feet too long. He didn't come along until the next day. So he was born 3 years and 1 day later after Arlie. And they had their differences. Daryl liked horses. Arlie didn't want nothing to do with them. He liked bicycles and making things. He made himself a little car there on the farm, and one that you had to push. But he said, "Now next year, I'm going to make one with a motor in," and he did. The next year, he built him another little car, had a motor in.
How old was he?
Huh?
How old was he?
How old were you?
We moved there on New Paris there.
So he
13.
always enjoyed taking his toys apart, seeing how they were made, and tinkering with the cars. And I think working with cars has been your hobby, hasn't it, kind of? Rebuilding them. And Daryl has learned to like riding bike too in the meantime, which surprised me. Since they didn't agree on things very well, when we did chores, they each had their individual chores. But one night we wanted to go somewhere and get done with the chores quicker, so I put them both to spreading the straw in the shed where the cows lay. Baled straw, and Daryl, he would take each slab of straw and tear it apart, and Harley would come down there and he'd kick one here and one there and to get done. And so they didn't agree on how to do some things. But
Well, you became a farmer, but it didn't.
well, that's okay. I told him when he graduated from high school that it's okay, have another job. You got a job with a car dealer, didn't you, in Goshen?
They like your rambler.
Yeah.
Well, I bought a Ford, about fired me.
And when Daryl graduated, I said I think he felt kind of slighted because most of his kids in high school with him went to college. And he knew he could go to college and make it, and he kind of wanted to, and still he wasn't too sure. And I said, well, go ahead and go to college if you want to, and if you want to do something else, that's fine. But if you want to be a farmer, I think we can make a place for you on the farm. So he took his college. What did you do? Took it in 5 years?
Well, yeah, a little more than 4 years.
He always wanted to be home in time to help chore, which that's suited me fine. And it extended, then you sometimes didn't start until after I had the crops harvested, I guess. So he became a farmer, anyhow.
Went to college so I could choose to farm.
So Arlene, you introduced the family to television you got on eBay, is that right?
Yeah, on eBay. I was working at a smoker loan company, New Paris. And I said I wanted a TV so I could watch football. Didn't have a TV, so I got it, got home with it. It was winter, got stuck at the end of the lane. So I went out, got the sled, and pulled this TV up the lane and put it on my room. Dad come in and said, "We're going to have a TV, it's going to be down here in the living room where we all got it." He paid me, I think I paid $40 for it, something like that. So he paid me for it, and it's at the living room after that, and out in my room after all. No,
Dallas had experience one time. We were gone, so he was out in the chore, and he got locked in the hog house. And those places don't smell too good, you know. Anyhow, he got frantic almost because he couldn't get out. How did you get out?
Well, what happened was Daryl and I were doing, while I was farming there, it was a very bad winter, one of the worst winters. Silage froze, all kind of terrible stuff. But he got impatient with thawing the doors. It would always freeze around the edges, and he pulled the knob off. But he didn't tell me. So there was enough friction on the knob to turn it. And when I shut the door behind me, I heard a click, click, click. But I didn't know what happened, so I went ahead and fed the pigs. And then I went back and turned the knob, and the knob just went round and round and round. The door was still latched. The knob had fallen off, and I slammed the door behind me. And there were no windows, there was nothing. And he went in to have breakfast. And so I sat there, and every 10 minutes or so, I'd go and pound on the door. It just kept pounding, and eventually he came out and wondered where I was, I guess. I was probably a cop. Yeah, that was when I was driving the cop. That first one, I was wondering when one of us would have to go up in the silo and hack the silage loose while the machine was coming right around behind you. And the other one would listen in case you screamed. And then they could shut off the machine and go get what's left of you. You go up there with a pick and pick the salad loose. Otherwise, it would just run around on top of the frozen salad and we'll do it.
You love farming as much as I do.
I'm not making it up.
Any of you other children got stories you want to tell?
Thank you for telling us stories tonight. And thank you also for the weekend.
Well, I must say, it's been nice to have all of you here. The family isn't quite all here, but we had a good representation, and I think 44 people out of 50. My family number is 50 without me, and I think that's a pretty good representation. And I'm glad you could be here, and I hope you found it worth the trouble of getting here. You had to buy your way here. I've been watching, and it seems like everybody's enjoyed themselves. And I've enjoyed watching you do things, even though I couldn't keep up with you, didn't try.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
You're welcome.